Hi guys, welcome to Unit 3. This time around you are going to be working on a persuasive research paper. This is also sometimes called an argument paper. So we want to spend some time talking about how to argue effectively in writing. Many of you guys have probably had to give an argument speech or write argument papers before, and you've learned some techniques and strategies that are not necessarily going to be beneficial for this paper. So we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about what you want to keep in mind and how you should approach this paper as far as both tone and content. A lot of times we think of arguing as trying to basically prove that we are right and somebody else is wrong, and if we can get them to stop responding, then clearly we have won the argument. Remember that it's not effective in terms of conversation, in terms of getting people to understand, let's say, your side of the story or your perspective, to talk them into submission. If you think about it the other way around. Have you ever been in an argument with somebody and you stop talking eventually? Why do you stop talking? Is it because you understand? Is it because you've changed your mind? Or is it because you're frustrated and upset that that person is no longer listening to you, and so you've decided that the best thing for you to do is just walk away? Most of the time when people stop responding, it's because they've stopped listening. They have decided that they're not going to be heard, so they are done with the conversation. So our purpose with this persuasive research paper is not to persuade in the sense that we're trying to prove that we are right and they are wrong. It is to explain our point of view so that we can persuade the audience that our point of view is valid. There's a big difference between being right and having a valid perspective. Having a valid perspective means that what you're discussing is able to be supported by evidence. This means actual, real, empirical, or expert evidence. If we're right, we can tend to make arguments based on, a lot of times fallacy comes into being right, because we're trying to just show that the people we disagree with are bad people, or that they have a bad perspective, or that clearly if they care about people, then they should think about something a different way. The problem is, and the second point here, is that we cannot argue based on morals and ethics. Why? Because everybody has different morals and ethics, because everybody has lived different experiences. Everybody has been through, they know different people, they've been through different circumstances and situations in their lives which have formed their point of view. So everybody's going to have slightly different morals from yours. Everybody's going to have slightly different ethics from yours. And so if we're saying that we're right and somebody else is wrong based on a moral argument or what we feel is an ethical argument, that's often going to fall flat with a reader who disagrees with us, because they have a slightly different way of seeing the world. They have a slightly different perspective or a slightly different approach, which is going to make them disagree with you fundamentally based on morals and ethics. What we need to do instead is argue based on facts and logic. So when we are looking to validate our argument and we are seeking expert advice, expert fact, expert findings, we are going to find facts that the experts have uncovered. We can write those facts down and analyze them. You've just been practicing this for 4 weeks, okay? We can write those facts down and analyze. What do they mean? Why do they matter? Using logical arguments, making logical connections instead of taking a guess or zeroing in on one or two aspects that we think are really important and ignoring the rest, which is often what happens when we argue in this way. we also tend to look for sources that specifically agree with us. So we go out on the web and we start searching and we find, maybe we find things from particular news outlets or maybe blog posts, or we seek out information that absolutely aligns with our point of view and we ignore the rest. If you are going to persuade your reader based on facts and logic, if you are going to show them that your point of view is valid, then you must be able to find expert scholarly sources that support your point of view. If these expert scholarly sources do not validate your point of view has to change, not your sources. That's a difficult thing to go through because we definitely experience cognitive dissonance when that happens. But if you are going to present an accurate, clear argument that can be demonstrated, that is valid, you must be able to validate it using scholarly expert evidence. People who are in the field, people who deal with this subject every single day. What are their findings? What have they uncovered? What does that mean? And why and how does that support the claim you're making? Okay? Also, when people are arguing, they teach you to forget about other people's point of view. That's not important here. It's just about what we think. It's what we believe. Quite the contrary. If you, and this goes along with the next point here, but if you take the time to explore those counter arguments, often you will find that you and the folks you think oppose you actually agree on numerous points. There are small areas in which you differ. If you can show your audience that they are in fact correct, factually correct on certain points of their reasoning, they're much more likely to listen to you if you say, but in this one area, consider this, and present evidence that slightly differs or does differ maybe substantially from what they think, because you've shown them that you're listening to them. Okay, you're exploring their counter argument. You're listening to what they have to say. You're listening to what they think. You're listening to what they believe. And you're saying, you know what? You're right about some of that. Here's one thing where we should consider something different. This is why we should seek to understand their views. We want to understand where they're coming from. We want to understand why they hold the views they do, because doing so will help us better explain ourselves and why and how our point of view is also important or useful to their point of view. Okay? Going along with insulting folks who have different views, we tend to talk down to them. I've shared this with my classes already, but I read a book about how how non-scientists use scientific arguments poorly. And the author of that book at one point was talking about folks who are not completely sold on the idea of climate change. And so he decided that he was going to call these individuals, he was going to refer to them as those who oppose, ask questions about, deny, or are skeptical about climate change. So for the rest of the book, he used this acronym to refer to folks who are unsure about the whole climate change debate. Why is this a problem? Because if those individuals reading that book do disagree with climate change, we just lost that entire audience. Okay? Sometimes it's not as overt as this, however. Sometimes we just sort of talk down, maybe in a sideways way, about our audience or about somebody who thinks a certain way. Often it happens by accident because we're so sure about our point of view. And we're so frustrated with folks who have an opposing point of view that we tend to sort of say sly or snarky things about them or slip a word in here or there. You guys, the point of writing a persuasive paper is to persuade those who hold a different opinion from you. Therefore, it's necessary for you to assume that you are writing this essay to an audience who disagrees with you. Why? Because you then must find a way to invite those individuals to listen. It means you do not insult them. You do not call them names. You do not talk about how lousy or stupid or ridiculous their point of view is. You look for ways to explain why and how you think the way you do. to show evidence that supports your point of view. And here's the kicker. You're not here to convince them. If you do convince that skeptical audience to change their mind, good for you. All you're doing is asking them to understand that your point of view is valid and to show them that you understand their point of view is valid, which means able to be supported by evidence. It does not mean right. It does not mean wrong. If an opinion is invalid, it means it cannot be supported by evidence. You are not here to invalidate their argument. You are here only to validate yours. So, when you're writing these papers, please remember that you are here to invite conversation with your reader. You are here to invite your reader to listen to you and to explain why and how you hold a particular perspective, and that is all. If you can do that by also exploring the parts where you have found that that skeptical audience is also valid in what they believe, you should do so, because that's going to encourage conversation and it's going to bring you closer into community and discussion, conversation with that readership, which is the only way we make any progress with civil discourse.